This is a fish, ordinary looking. Silver-scaled, unremarkable, the kind that moves through coastal waters in schools so dense they look like a single shifting organism from above. You would not look twice at it in a market or on a reef. There is nothing about its exterior that suggests anything is wrong. But open its mouth. Where the tongue should be, there is something else with eyes and with legs. Something that has been living in there, anchored to the stub of what used to be the fish's own tongue, feeding on its mucus and blood for what may have been the majority of the fish's life. It did not hide there. It moved in, took over, and made itself permanent. Landlords have been pulling similar moves for centuries. This one is just more honest about it. Everything you learned about parasites assumes they take something from a host. Blood, nutrients, tissue, the parasite extracts, and the host are diminished in a transaction, unpleasant but structurally simple. Cymothoa Exigua is not interested in a transaction. This isopod does not merely feed on its host. It replaces a part of it. It severs the tongue, assumes the tongue's position, attaches itself to the muscles and blood supply the tongue used to occupy, and then functions, loosely, grotesquely, as a substitute organ. The fish continues eating. The louse intercepts a portion of whatever passes through. The fish does not die from the arrangement, at least not immediately. It simply spends the rest of its life with a crustacean where its tongue used to be. If that sentence did not produce a physical reaction somewhere in your body, read it again. We are not living in a world where parasites merely borrow from their hosts. We are living in a world where at least one of them has learned to become part of the host entirely, to wear the host's own anatomy like a uniform and collect rent from the inside. And it gets weirder. Meet Cymothoa Exigua, a parasitic isopod, a crustacean technically, more closely related to the pill bug in your garden than to anything you would typically associate with horror, has evolved one of the most audacious survival strategies in the animal kingdom. It begins small. A juvenile Cymothoa, barely visible, enters the fish through the gills. At this stage, it is male. This detail matters, and we will return to it. It travels through the gill chamber into the fish's mouth, finds the base of the tongue, and begins feeding on the blood supply there. Over time, weeks, possibly months, the feeding severs the tongue's connection to its own circulatory system. The tongue atrophies, shrinks, eventually detaches or is absorbed entirely. The space it occupied is now available. The isopod moves into that space. It anchors itself to the tongue muscles using hooked legs specifically shaped for this attachment, connects to the fish's blood supply as a permanent feeding arrangement, and settles in. At this point, something else happens. Something that makes the whole system considerably stranger than it already is. The isopod changes sex. Cymothoa Exigua is a protandrous hermaphrodite, which means it begins life male and transitions to female under the right conditions. The right condition, in this case, is being the only isopod in a fish's mouth. Once established and alone, the male isopod becomes female. If a second juvenile isopod enters the same fish, also male, it remains male. The two mate inside the host. The female produces offspring. The fish, meanwhile, is still just trying to eat. The math says a parasite this disruptive should kill its host quickly. It often does not. Studies of fish populations carrying Cymothoa Exigua infections show that many hosts survive for extended periods with the isopod in place. The fish eat less efficiently, The substitute tongue does not function as well as the original, and the louse takes a cut of whatever passes through, but they continue functioning. They carry the parasite through the entirety of their adult lives, without any external sign that the inside of their mouth has been permanently occupied. If you caught one of these fish and held it in your hands, it would look completely normal. It would only be when you looked inside that the arrangement became visible. A pair of eyes looking back at you from inside the mouth of something that should only have one set of eyes, which is, coincidentally, the exact face people make when they find out about this parasite for the first time. The fish and the observer briefly shared the same expression. But here is what actually keeps marine biologists unsettled. Cymothoa exigua is not a rare, deep-sea anomaly. It is found in coastal and reef fish populations across the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. It has been documented in over a dozen commercially fished species. There is no treatment. No removal protocol does not damage the host further. Once the tongue is gone and the isopod is anchored to the mussel bed, the fish's best available option is to continue living with the replacement in place. The functional replacement question in Cymothoa exigua research centers on how closely the isopod actually mimics the tongue's biomechanical role. The tongue in teleost fish is not simply a passive surface. It participates actively in prey manipulation, suction feeding dynamics, and the mechanical processing of food before swallowing. Losing it is a significant functional deficit. Current research suggests that infected fish show measurably reduced feeding efficiency and body condition compared to uninfected individuals, meaning the substitute does not actually substitute particularly well. The isopod is not performing the tongue's function. It is occupying the tongue's position while the fish compensates with whatever biomechanical adjustments remain available. There is something that lodges in the mind about an animal that takes the place of something essential and functions just well enough that the host keeps going. The fish eats less efficiently, grows more slowly, expends energy compensating for a deficit that never closes, and does all of this without any awareness that the original equipment is gone. It does not mourn the tongue. It does not know what it has lost. It simply operates around the absence with whatever it has left. Humans do this too, not with parasites anchored to the jaw, but with losses that quietly reshape the way everything functions afterward. Losses that become structural over time, that the rest of the system quietly reorganizes itself around until the compensation feels like the original. But if Cymothoa exigua can replace a living organ from the inside, suppressing the immune response just enough to stay, functioning just well enough to remain undetected, we have to ask what happens when a parasite does not stop at one organ. Because there are organisms that set their ambitions considerably higher than a single tongue. They do not want a room in the house. They want the whole building, and they have been quietly filing the paperwork for longer than the host